Hello, today is May 21st. We're about to jump back to April in our little time machine because I was actually making a full length video of me working on this, thinking that would be the route that I'd want to go, and this was just going to be sort of a minor thing. But I've actually ended up making lots of smaller videos of me working on this personal project, and it was getting to be kind of a hassle to keep up with all of the clips of me doing this. So I figured that I would just take this video that I had been working on of my full process and sort of make it into different videos. So this first bit that you're getting is basically the origin story of my personal project and all of the lead up of how I got to my idea, my hypothesis. I made another video of my hypothesis. And yeah, you're going to get to see the background information and just me sort of stumbling around in the dark and trying to figure out where this is even going to go. I feel like I've gotten to such a good place with it right now. I actually have my hypothesis. I'm writing my literature review, so it's really developed quite fast. I think I felt like this was like 3 months ago that I started this, and it's been like a month and a half. So that was kind of a shock. But I had a lot of clips at first of me brainstorming and doing all of the brainstorming process, but I'm actually thinking that I'm going to save that for a different video and just clip it because it was just really getting very long, and I had more content of me brainstorming and doing the whole process that I could include in a different video. So yeah, this is basically just the origin story, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm doing this project, the sort of the books I read and the information that got me there before I had this really sort of set in stone what I was going to be sort of looking for. So I hope you enjoy. All right. This video is going to be the process of me completing this personal project that I have started for myself. I've been working on it. I'm already in the midst of working on it, and really I've been working on it for years when I really think about it, but this is I think it's getting a little bit more like, I don't know, hands-on now, so that's why I just decided to start like recording all this. So this is gonna be an intro of me explaining my personal project and all of the research that I've done so far, and sort of the process that I've begun, and then I'm now gonna start recording the actual process of me doing this. My personal project is that I'm learning how to make my own neural network. Do I have experience? No. It required coding. Did I know that? No. Do I know how to code? No, I don't. I'm learning right now. Actually, that's part of the video. Do I have any kind of background that would facilitate this? No, except that I was traumatized at one point. Well, yes, at one point in time. And so I have that experience, and I have the experience of everything I read. I have a comparative literature degree with a concentration in Portuguese studies. So obviously very, very valuable information, very valuable sort of backgrounds. But yeah, but I just have extreme desire to do this project. Actually, it's because I'm gonna explain, like I said, I'm gonna explain some of like the science and everything that I've put together and the reason why I'm doing this. But the reason that I went into like the neural network route is because I actually have already, this is very close to my heart because it's just me trying to piece together my experience that I had with my trauma and just wanting an answer because I had an experience that for scientific reasons is controversial. Okay, yet I'm living it, so I have to figure it out somehow. If not, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life or myself because I'll never understand myself. So that is my personal motivation for doing this. Now, in terms of like why I decided to like just jump in and just do like learn neural networks and things, it's because I started to put all this together. I was okay before I was doing any of this like more scientific route. I was just piecing it together on the inside. And then I started to like learn about neuroscience and psychology and all these things and started try to put together things that I was learning to understand myself with what I knew about myself and my experience. And then I was like, I want to start this now. This is all I want to do. This is all I care about. I want to get this answer. Now, unfortunately, seeing as I have a comparative literature and societies degree with a concentration in Portuguese studies, nobody is gonna give me a freaking job doing anything like this. You know, I actually didn't think to go into to start learning neural networks at all. Like I was just, oh, I'm gonna try to get into a PhD program, or I'm gonna try to find some avenue to do some kind of project. The further along I got, I was like, nobody's letting me into anything. And if I wait for somebody to I was like the steps and the building blocks that it would take for me to get from my position right now to somebody giving me any kind of permission to do any project similar to this on like a more like, you know, neuroscience, like EEG, like MRI sort of level, it would take me like probably like a decade at least. So I was like, that's just not, I was like, but I have the information right now and I have the desire right now, so I'm not gonna wait like a decade for someone to be like, okay, fine, now you can do something adjacent to this. So that's why I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go into it, but I did learn about neural networks along the process, and I was like, okay, that's seeming like probably my best avenue right now to start to explore this right now, because I want to do it right now, because I have the motivation right now. I don't feel like waiting. That's just my personality. I'm like, I don't feel like waiting. I just want to get into it and just like, why would I wait 10 years when I'm starting to get answers together right now. So basically, okay, I guess I should explain like the controversy briefly before I go into like what I'm actually have been learning. But okay, so dissociative disorders, we don't really know enough about them. We don't know enough about disorders like dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity disorder, disorders like that. And every time you mention anything about those types of disorders, you will be met with, well, you know, they're very controversial. I know. I know they are. But I have been learning. Okay, so a lot of people are very back and forth on particularly dissociative identity disorder. People say that it is a disorder of social influenceability. Oh, dissociative identity disorder is basically when it used to be called multiple personality disorder. Now people have a different understanding of it, but it's basically when as somebody has gone through like continued sort of intense trauma, they start to split into these sorts of different personas, different fragments of themselves that sort of protect them or keep them sort of separated into these little usable sort of boxes, right? And that as they sort of work through the memories, many of which they haven't really dealt with consciously in their lives or have forgotten because of the dissociative nature of the disorder, then they start to sort of feel more whole. So I never had dissociative identity disorder, but I did experience a lot of bizarre dissociative symptoms and sort of dissociative amnesia and sort of, I don't know. I had an interesting experience. I don't know what somebody would diagnose me as, but anyways, but yeah. So, but the thing is, but okay, I'm gonna jump into what I learned so that I can teach you. I have no better way of explaining it other than showing it to you right now. Okay, let me take you down my path of everything I've learned and my thoughts so far. So basically, this is a theory of structural dissociation that I've drawn for you here. Okay, here's the idea. So basically, if you have no sort of disorder, no anything, but you just experience the world, lucky you, as one sort of cohesive person. You don't feel split up or sort of like, you know, you just feel like one person having one experience for the most part, right? Now, the point of the theory is that as you start to have these sorts of dissociative symptoms, experiences, as you get sort of more and more traumatized, you basically start to have little splits. Forgot to write that. So this is primary, I messed up handwriting, primary structural dissociation. Okay, so this is going to happen in somebody with PTSD. So this sort of normal you that goes along and experiences the world as sort of one person day to day is called the apparent normal part. They're going to be the ones functioning throughout your daily life, right? Now, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, something like that, let's say you experience flashbacks, you know, most of the day, you're not thinking very actively about what has occurred to you. Now, all of a sudden, let's say something triggers you and you're thrown back into this other world of this sort of you and all of these memories and experiences and sort of all of these little, this sort of self that got stuck in this moment of your traumatic experience, right? That's called your emotional part. So most of the time you're sort of walking around not really integrated, you know, that emotional part is not integrated into your sense of self yet. And as you heal, then it integrates, right? So now we have secondary structural dissociation. And this is like people with, let's say, complex PTSD, so it's more chronic, sort of ongoing trauma, or borderline personality disorder. And this one, you continue to have a single apparent normal part. So that single you, let's say the single Joe who walks around, Joe is just Joe. But then Joe also has all these little memories and these little things that are just, he's never really integrated. Sometimes something hits him and he just feels like he's 6 years old again. Somebody hurts his feelings and now all of a sudden he's back to being 15 and in his broken home. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't still think, oh, this is Joe, but it's almost a different Joe that's been sort of kept and held in this little container of Joe. And as he heals the trauma, he's going to start to integrate all of these sorts of memories and feelings and things. At this point, really, this is, in the theory, it says that this is when, sometimes the emotional parts can get so split off that people can already sort of start to feel them as different, completely different senses of selves, and maybe even they can develop personality types. But that's really more, that's more in tertiary structural dissociation. So this is where something like dissociative identity disorder falls. And when it gets to this point, usually people with dissociative identity disorder have been through like years of very severe sort of neglect, trauma, they've been trafficked, things like that. And it's extremely, extremely painful for them to deal with different parts of themselves. And they have all sorts of different sort of parts. They can have child sort of parts of them that are very, very sort of very separated. And those parts are so separated that they don't even feel like them. So people might be going about their day and, there's parts of them that they literally can't remember, like a conversation they had with someone. Not in the sense of like, oh, I just forgot, but like as if they were like having a completely different experience that they can't really access. And, they have all of these sorts of emotional parts as well that can also have personalities. But then the interesting thing about when you get down here is that they start to have, they will, as part of the tertiary structural dissociation, have different apparent normal parts as well. So completely different senses of selves that can just be there living their day-to-day experience. I hope that all made sense. But this was the first thing I read that I was like, whoa, I feel like this makes a lot of sense, right? Because I think that sometimes people look at something like dissociative identity disorder in a very disjointed way. And I think that it was really like enlightening to me to see it as this sort of like a spectrum that starts to occur as people start to get more and more trauma. It starts to split off more and more. So already I'm looking at that, I'm thinking like there's got to be a little like switch or a function or something just getting thrown off and off and off and off as you're going down the dissociation sort of scale. So next I read this book, Rethinking Consciousness, a scientific theory of subjective experience. It's an amazing book. That's where I first learned about a concept called cortical attention, which I'm going to butcher my explanation of this, but basically our brain is always sort of having this little, we can only focus on really one thing at once. I've read that if you think you're multitasking, I think he actually mentions in the book, if you think you're multitasking, you're not. You're just splitting your attention back and forth between different things, right? You can only hold attention to one thing at once. So in your brain, there's always this sort of competition going on for what's going to be that thing to grab your attention. And this is where I first read about top-down versus bottom-up processing. I won't go into that too much yet. I'm going to go into a little bit in another book, but it's just, it was part of my process of learning everything. So Michael Graciano also goes into the idea of cortical attention as a sort of basis for selfhood. What we focus on and what our mind sort of tends to be captivated by, and that competition that's going on the inside is also sort of, and then also consciousness as a sort of, his whole theory, it is a theory, okay, but the whole theory is that he thinks there's so many theories about what consciousness is that are going around. And basically his theory is that cortical attention is seeing all this, I'm going to sort of butcher it because I haven't read it in like I read this like a few months ago, but basically he thinks that consciousness is this very sort of deep, intuitive, in a way it's not real, but it's sort of like just this really, really deeply rooted sort of intuitive understanding of like the idea that we exist and the idea that we have attention in the first place, and just our awareness of like that, of our sort of attention. I don't know if that was a very good explanation, but I found that to be really, really compelling. And also it did make me think about the fact that like our experience of like I am, like I am being, I am, is this sort of really deep-rooted thing. And what he says is that even though we know, like, even if we were to know that, it doesn't dismantle it. Like, it's just like we still feel this sort of, we're having this conscious subjective experience, even if we say, well, it's not really real, right? It doesn't go away because it's so deeply rooted in our sort of mind and our experience as an animal as well. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about a lot of people who have dissociative identity disorder or other types of dissociative disorders, but I went straight for dissociative identity disorder just because I was like, that's the most complex one, so it's giving me the most extreme example of an experience. But I was like, they usually develop it over their childhood as well, so I was like, you're just sort of developing your sense of self. And but anyways, I was just thinking, I was like starting to theorize and just think about it, and I was like thinking about being or consciousness as a sensation or sort of deeper package. I was like, can this be broken into multiple pieces, into multiple different sensations of self and consciousness, as just a thought? And like, that's the thing, is that even when people start to heal from their dissociative identity disorder, the alters don't just go away because you're like, yeah, that's not real, that's just your trauma. You have to go really, really deep into the process and really sort of root through all the traumas to like get out of it. So I was like, well, maybe there's a very similar function, but maybe less deeply rooted that's occurring, if it's just that deep and that intuitive that like you're having this other self, right? And then I was thinking, like, I guess like my like sort of line of thinking was maybe your people can develop different networks of cortical attention, like more than one sort of line of cortical attention, which I'm going to go into more in a second. So these are my first crazy little thoughts that I was having. Here's my failed PhD application right here. I was thinking, how might that occur? Like, where does cortical attention happen was like my next question. So I went and I did research. I was like, how do we even get cortical attention? Like, where does it start in the brain? So I read and I looked at like all these different, oh, it originates in this part of the brain, this part of the brain, or like not originates, but I was like, there's so many parts of the brain responsible for cortical attention that like, how can I choose one to be like, that's where? But then that changed when I read about neurosynchrony. I'm going to talk about gamma synchrony in a second. But the idea of like neurosynchrony is that actually the way things get done in our brain, there's lots of different parts of the brain doing lots of different things. And some of them are even very similar, but they need to communicate with each other to get more complex things done. So the way that they basically interact with each other is through these sorts of like wavelengths that are at different wavelengths. So I learned about there's different types of synchrony that are going on, but I learned about one type called gamma synchrony. And gamma synchrony, so this is one type of wavelength that can occur. All the different types of wavelengths are responsible for different things. One is more for like resting states, daydreaming. One is more for when you're active, you're out and about. Gamma synchrony is responsible for something, okay, so it's responsible for feature binding, for creating single cohesive neural representation. So I'm going to go into that. It also is responsible for cortical attention, and people theorize that it's responsible for consciousness. So, okay, this is the thing. So our sort of ability to integrate like one experience and sort of our reality, gamma synchrony is one of the big types of synchronies responsible for that, and it occurs at all different parts of the brain. But basically, okay, it has been studied in relationship to schizophrenia. So let's say people who, are seeing things that aren't really there, having delusions, that's already starting to be attributed to sort of changes in gamma synchrony. But nobody has looked at this for dissociative identity disorder or really for dissociative disorders at all. And this was my thinking. I was like, for dissociative identity disorder, how can one person, when people have these alters, like, let's say in one sense of self might be like, think that superheroes are the best and they love watching Marvel movies, okay? One alter might be extremely triggered by them or something like that. That's a very simplified explanation, but actually alters in dissociative identity disorder have literally even different tastes. Some of them have different genders, it's really that deep, like different world views. And I was like, how would that happen, right? But then I was thinking, like, that would be, maybe they're having a harder time creating a single cohesive neural representation, right? They're creating many different neural representations. So I was like thinking like this, like, let's say like one person is looking at an apple. In one state, they might look at the apple and be like, oh, that's great. And the other state, they're like, I hate apples, right? Okay, again, very bad sort of explanation, but the apple doesn't change, does it? It's their state of mind that's changing looking at the apple. And I was like, that's kind of, I thought it was related to cortical attention, because I was like, the things that are even going to be pulling somebody's attention in these different alter states is going to be like completely different, right? So that's why I was like, maybe it is like a cortical attention thing, but I need to figure out how. Ooh, I'm getting out of breath. Then I read about hippocampal sharp wave ripples. And I need to remember, why did I put this? Because it is related to gamma synchrony. I think it was gamma synchrony occurring, or the ripples gamma. Let me look that up in a second. But I read about these ripples, and so the that occur in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is actually already been pretty correlated with trauma. So I think, if I'm getting this right, I think that people who have been through trauma, I think their hippocampuses literally even shrink. I need to remember if that's right. And so basically these ripples are responsible for memory replay and coordinated memory recall, also something called consolidation. And it can be a sort of clocking mechanism. Yeah, so a clocking mechanism basically responsible for the memories to come to sort of be recalled in a coordinated way. Okay, that's really bad explanation. Retrieval. Okay, so it's, anyways, okay, I'm getting a little bit all over the place, but then I was like, this seems really related, because people with these disorders have sort of memory issues, right? Like they often experience dissociative amnesia, or it takes them a very long time to recall their memory, right? Like the whole point is that people will live for years having these sorts of dissociative identity disorder symptoms, and then like when they're much older, when they're in therapy, then they can finally recall, like they start to recall things, they start to deal with things, right? And that was related to my symptoms as well. So that's why I was like, oh, like ding ding ding, we got it, like this is it right here. So yeah, let me see, I'm gonna say in the next clip what, or in like 2 clips, why that has to do with gamma synchrony. But I think it is the I think it was, the article I read was gamma synchrony with these sharp wave ripples in certain parts of the hippocampus was creating these sort of coordinated memory recall energy, or they did a specific study on that, but they were discussing this. This is what I'm reading right now, Surfing Uncertainty by Andy Clark. I'm still just reading it, like I'm only in the first sort of chapter, because it's very dense and it's a bit more of a challenge for me, but it's been like really useful. But anyways, here I learned about the predictive processing model, which is a sort of model of the brain and how it learns, that basically says that we are constantly creating these predictions that we're either that are either being confirmed or not confirmed. I talked in another video about, he says it's sort of like, our perception of reality is sort of controlled hallucination. And so yeah, our sort of predictions of the world are sort of really indicative of our reality. And okay, I think I'm not going to talk about this book as well probably as some of the others, because I'm still reading it and trying to piece it together. But once again, start talking about bottom up and top down signals, and this one really made it sort of click for me, like how they work. But basically, when our bottom up sort of sensations and signals, our bottom up sort of signals usually have to do with like sensory sort of experiences, like touching this book, or things like that. And then top down signals, if this is a horrible sort of like simplification, I'm sorry, but top down signals are usually things that are a little bit more are sort of hypotheses and sort of predictions that we're making from like deeper places in like our brain, sort of. I know this is not a very great explanation, but basically like more of our internal thought processes as well. But anyway, so what he explained is that when our bottom up sensations or signals are, so they basically are sent up, and then our top down predictions sort of meet these signals. And so either we have a good prediction and it sort of matches what the bottom up sensation is, and we're like, okay, great, we got it, we know what we're talking about, no need to change anything, right? And we're making good predictions. Or we're wrong, and then our mind takes note of that. Why am I so out of breath? Oh my god, a lot of talking. But yeah, and so our perception of the world is like one big prediction that's constantly sort of in flux with our, okay. But this was the important part, is that Andy Clark basically explains that neural networks, which are this sort of AI, it's not AI, it's like these it's like these computer systems that basically mimic exactly how the brain learn, mimic like neurons and all of these things to sort of learn, you know. I think AI uses this as well. I don't know if, yeah. So basically, I'm still learning all this, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit wishy, like sort of here and there. But basically, okay, so neural networks operate the same way. And that was really important for me because I was like, whoa, I didn't know that it was so specific like that. Like, I didn't know that neural networks also had bottom up signals and top down signals. And I need to make sure that's all right. But that's what I'm understanding from the book. I was like, that's crazy. I didn't know that. And so then I was like, wait a minute. I didn't know they work just like the brain. So I was like, wait, I could just use that. Like, I could just use that to test my theory, right? Now, with all that in mind, let me tell you my hypothesis. I thought, okay, so we know that, like, I was like, we know that there's this sort of timing. I know this page is not full as it should be, but with thinking about the hippocampal sharp wave ripples, you know, probably really important that the memories be coordinated. Okay, you're gonna hear all my loose thoughts that are gonna hopefully culminate into something. I was like, what if I throw off the timing sequence? I'm gonna talk, okay, there's so much more to say. I'm gonna talk about how I'm gonna do that, but basically I was like, what if I throw off, if somebody's sort of coordinated memory recall was thrown off, which it is the case in people with like complex PTSD or like, you know, dissociative identity disorder and that stuff, like the sort of cohesive memory, sort of coordinated memory sort of element gets thrown off and people remember things later. I was like, what if just when it gets worse and worse, like it's just throwing off other things? And this is a lot of different sort of hypotheses. I'm going to see what actually works and what can be true. So this is just my initial thoughts. I was thinking, like, can the theory of structural dissociation be translated into a neural network? And how would that happen? Which I'm thinking will have to do with throwing off. Okay, I have two thoughts. Throwing off the coordinated memory recall element. I need to figure out how to do that in a neural network setting. Oh, and or I was thinking, well, the thing is that this is what I know from my experience, okay? And what I imagine maybe is the case in other experience. I was like, the thing is that, like, if you're experiencing something, but you can't really remember it at all, maybe you experienced like a bottom up sensory experience, but you didn't like because something got thrown off, maybe there wasn't like a top down reaction. I know this is all sounding a little bit like random, but I was like, these are just little like things that I'm thinking of in terms of how do I make that happen in a neural network. And then I'm just sort of having these sorts of like imaginations. These are just sort of like my imaginations of like how maybe that could manifest in a neural network. Like I was thinking like maybe if I throw it off enough, like because has anybody ever tried to traumatize a neural network? Have we tried that? And then like I was like, what if like maybe it'll start building like a secondary network? Because I was like, if information is coming in and it can't consolidate it, because that's the thing, is the hippocampal sharp wave ripples are responsible for consolidating the memories and the information so that they can be sort of useful, right? But what happens if the neural network can't consolidate the information or can't consolidate it on time, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera? Will it start to build like some kind of like nest sequence of like more information in a different place, or maybe even like a secondary network? You know, I don't, these are all just a little bit crazy, but these are like my thoughts right now. And I'm like, maybe I can make it happen if I throw off the timing sequence of the neural network, or like, I have a lot of different thoughts. Throw off the timing sequence, or maybe make it so that there's some kind of glitch in the top down processing, and that maybe will create another network. And this is my thinking, is that like, then I'm going to try to ask it and be like, if it can remember information from, if that happens, maybe it won't be able to access and retrieve the information from the other network, right? Like, then maybe I could ask it. I'm still learning about neural networks. I'm trying to figure this out. Maybe if I ask it, like, I don't know, like I throw off the sort of information here of like, is the sky blue? And then I ask like, is the sky blue to the, like this one or something, you know what I mean? And it's like, maybe you can't access the information. and then that would sort of point at like a dissociative amnesia sort of thing. I don't know, I just thought maybe, like, I just thought that the theory of structural dissociation almost gave like a network vibe, you know, of like, okay, the ANP with the EPs. I was like, maybe that can translate into a computer. Get back to me. So now you see like everything that I sort of learned to get me to the point where I was going to be like, okay, I'm going to try to understand neural networks. Now, I'm going to show you like now the next part of the process that I've already undertaken. Before I show you everything, let me give a quick disclaimer because I'm going to show you how I'm using ChatGPT right now. Here's the thing. Okay. I don't know, like, I'm learning all this myself. I'm not in a neuroscience program. I never learned about neuroscience, like, outside of just my own personal, like, self-learning. I never learned how to code, okay? And I'm either gonna have to dish out a bunch of money for somebody to teach me, money I don't have, or I'm gonna have to get into some kind of program, which, who's gonna let me into that? I don't know. So I was like, you know what? I was like, in this situation, I will be okay using ChatGPT. I try to not use ChatGPT too much in my life. I definitely don't use it for my projects, like at school, when I was at school. I don't like the idea of AI like doing our art or writing our essays. I think it's just a little bit cheap. But I was like, I'm gonna have to just be okay. Oh, the other thing too is I know that it's not great for the environment. I don't know, like we need to figure that out because if everyone's gonna be using it, we need to not destroy the planet. But anyways, but I have been using ChatGPT in this case, and I'm going to show you how I am using it. I've been trying to basically use it as like a really knowledgeable teacher, to just ask like good questions or ask about things that I'm not like, I ask it to like maybe like explain a little part of a book, or like I asked it to explain neural synchrony to me at one point, things like that. I just ask it. I almost teach it like a really, really smart teacher about neuroscience and like everything I'm trying to learn. And I'm using that to self-learn because I was like, that's the only thing I can do. As you can see, I was having it explain some stuff from surfing uncertainty, like a receptive field, because these things actually, I was like, these are things I've noticed or have thought about, but I just don't know these terms. So I don't know. So it was like useful to me. And then let me see, like, okay, so what I asked it, and I think I wasn't in my account, but at that time, but I did ask it, are there free neural networks that I can use? And then it said there were, so I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I can do that. And then, but then I thought, let me see if I can find it. Okay, I asked it basically like, I remember there's one about long-term and short-term memory, so that was my first thought. But then I was like, can I get more specific? And I think they already did it did already talk about Nengo, which is, spoiler alert, the one I ended up choosing. But then I asked it if there was one that I was like, I want to study hippocampal sharp wave ripples and play around with clocking mechanism element. What would be the best neural network to use? So it gave me all these different choices, and I have decided on Nengo for now. I need to really do the work to understand like sort of why Nengo, so that I can know like how to really just angle in on the hippocampal sharp wave ripples. If Nengo is not maybe the right one, I'll try out a different one, but I'm gonna see if maybe this is a good one. It did say that it's a functional high level hippocampal model, so I thought that's why I chose Nengo. So anyways, so I thought I'd just go straight for the hippocampus sort of element. Now, I tried to download Nengo, and it was very confusing. Here's the thing. I thought it was going to be like a computer program. And all of a sudden, they had me opening, I was looking at this, I was like, what? How do I even do this? Okay, it kept saying like open, like do this and that in Terminal. This is how little I knew. I never in my life opened Terminal. This is Terminal? What? I didn't even know I had this. I was like, what even is this? And then apparently that's how you get Nengo, and that's how you do all this coding stuff. And I didn't even know anything about this. So so it did, like, you can see it was a very lengthy process of me just doing a bunch of stuff wrong, but it was like explaining the code to me and stuff. So I did finally figure out how to get Nengo. As you can see, I literally just had to ask it again how to open Nengo because I don't even know. How do I do it? Open Nengo, open your terminal app. Literally using this, I think this is how my grandma feels, like trying to like run her printer or something, and I'm like, grandma, like you just do this. I feel like now that's me right now because I have no idea what I'm doing. But yeah, so now it's gonna open Nengo. Now let me show you Nengo. I looked at this, I was like, oh, I don't know how to use this. I thought it was gonna be easier than it was. Not easier, but I don't think I expected it to look like this. Like, I thought it was gonna be more like, I don't know, maybe look more like ChatGPT or something. I didn't know. I was like, what? How do I even use this? And then I tried to like copy paste the code it said for like running like a like, I don't know, a neuron or something like that. I don't remember what exactly, but I didn't even understand. I don't think I got it to work very well. So then I was like, oh man. But I was determined. I was very determined. So I did ask ChatGPT. I was like, if you literally, where is it? I was like, if you know nothing about, what did I ask it? I was like, if I want to go from zero knowledge of Nengo to very usable level knowledge in 2 weeks, which was ambitious, but I just wanted to see what it would say, how would you suggest that I do it? So it did explain to me like all these things. Okay, so I'm not even going to worry about all this yet. Right now, where I am in my plan is just learning Python. Like, I don't know, I never learned how to code. So I have been learning how to code. I just started like recently, like a few days ago. It's not as bad as I thought. I thought it was going to be really, really hard to learn Python or learn how to code, but it's not that bad at all. This is what I'm using. It's called Coddy. I don't know. So I just started. It's like Duolingo for coding. Not sponsored, obviously, but so I just started learning to code, and it's really not that bad. So what I'm basically gonna do is I'm just gonna like keep learning. And the other thing, I'm just trying to learn the basics. So they did actually like, where is it? So it actually showed me how to create like a neural network and things like that. So what my first like plan of action is to just basically like learn what each of these little parts is like in coding. Like now I already started learning, so this is basically like a note, like it's not going to translate into the actual code. See, I'm learning. But yeah, and this is like, is this a variable? I don't remember. I'm learning, but yeah, and I'm gonna probably like tomorrow write all this down in my giant little paper pad, and I'm just gonna start labeling, because the goal is to basically try to understand what this is, so then I can like understand how to manipulate it. I'm probably gonna have to ask ChatGPT a lot of questions, I'm not gonna lie, but I think like if I can just get started understanding how it learns. I don't know, is this too big of a plan? I don't know. Hopefully, like, if I'm finished this video and I don't know, hopefully I like did it and I just figured it all out. I feel like I'm gonna have to do so much to actually understand how to get to the point I need to get to, but I feel like I've learned like kind of weirdly a lot, I don't know, the last like year. And I feel like I just learned more, like, I don't know, I just learned faster than I thought. So I was like, maybe I can learn this faster than I think, because I feel like I keep being like, well, how would I understand that? But then I keep understanding it. So I'm like, maybe I'm not, like, maybe I'm a little smarter than I think or something, or maybe, I don't know. But yeah, so from now on, I'm just going to show my process.